What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Awesemo team, and we are here today to discuss some college football DFS ahead of Friday, November the 5th. We have a two-game slate on deck, and of course, before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. Without further ado, let's bring you behind the glass, where we will take a look at our player usage data tool. We also have projections, ownership projections, slate write-ups, everything you need to dominate college football DFS. But digging into this two-game slate, this starts with Virginia Tech taking on Boston College. A really interesting game here. Both these teams have dealt with injuries this year, particularly Boston College. So the spread is 3 points in favor of Virginia Tech, and the total is just sitting at 47. Virginia Tech has been pretty balanced in terms of their overall play volume. Sometimes they will shoot up in tempo, but when they play from a lead, they will slow the pace too. So this is interesting. They're very sensitive with that. And then they're a very run-heavy team, 42% pass rate. That's because they're dual threat signal caller. Conversely, Boston College has slowed considerably. Most of that comes down to they lost their starting quarterback right away this season, Phil Jurkovec, and their pass rate's at 45%, elevated because of negative game script for the most part. But on the Virginia Tech side, you have Braxton Burmeister at quarterback. He's a good dual threat, 268 rushing yards on the year. Low volume passer, and that's just the Virginia Tech offense, only averaging about 190 yards per game on 26 attempts. It's not a great matchup. Boston College is a good secondary, but Burmeister is active in the run game. And with limited quarterbacks on this slate, he might be somebody that you just end up playing in like cash games and low-risk contests out of default. We'll get to the quarterbacks, but it's not a great position today. So just out of necessity, Burmeister becomes somebody we need to look at. From there in the backfield, we had a changing of the guard a little bit. Keyshawn King has been hurt, but Jalen Holston, he's been somebody that hasn't played much of late. That's because of the emergence of Malachi Thomas, who has 21 and 26 carries in back-to-back games. He has yet to see a target in the pass game, which I think is still okay. Boston College weakness on defense is the run, and Virginia Tech is favored here. So Malachi Thomas is a fine play. The reason he doesn't see any targets out of the pass game is because Raheem Blackshear is still there. He's like the 1B back right now to Malachi Thomas, but he is the clear preferred pass catching back. This guy's even dabbled at receiver in the past. So if you think BC gets up in this game, Blackshear should see elevated work. That is why he's a little bit cheaper. In the receiving game, this team lost their tight end, James Mitchell, really early in the year. He's an athletic tight end, used a lot in the slot. That condensed targets to Trey Turner and Tavian Robinson. And Trey Turner has kind of been this alpha. He almost has double the yardage of Robinson this year, 9.3 targets per game over their last four. Trey Turner's expensive, but he's a fine play if you're stacking this offense. Tavian Robinson is your discount version. He's still averaging 6.8 targets himself, so nearly 7. Just a little more underneath routes, kind of around the line of scrimmage is where you're going to find most of his usage. And then Caleb Smith is the wide receiver 3. Not targeted as much, a low upside option, but he's a punt play. Again, short slate, so you're going to have to consider some of these punts. Nick Gallo's the tight end. I would rather just pay the $200 to get to Caleb Smith. On the BC side, Dennis Grossel's been the starter for a while now, but he's played so poorly that we saw them split time with Emmett Moorhead. And I think this is a concern moving forward. Grossel is mobile, 72 yards on the ground, but he's just been so inefficient as a passer over the last couple of weeks that it wasn't surprising to see Moorhead get out there. Moorhead did not display any mobility whatsoever, negative 18 yards for him, which is not good. And he only completed 40% of his passes. But this scares me. We had the Akron game earlier this week where we had a QB switch. So in cash games, this isn't something I will be targeting. But in tournaments, I think you can take flyers on these guys. Just a tough situation to get to. In the run game, Pat Garwo has been their leader. He's averaging about 87 yards per game on 15 touches. However, he has almost no pass game involvement. He has just 2 targets this year. That is because they still use Alex Singfield and Travis Levy, and Levy being that preferred pass catching back. Levy has the 17 targets that dwarfs both Singfield and Garwo. So it's just a rotation where you have a clear role for each of these guys. Garwo is the main lead back, which he should benefit from facing a defense in Virginia Tech that allows 180 rushing yards per game. And Levy, I mean, he still gets work on the ground. He's averaging 8.5 touches per game. He'd be the punt I go to. And I think he's somewhat viable here. Boston College might just depress their pass attempts, even if they're down in this game because of the quarterback situation. I think you can play some of these backs for BC. In the receiving game, Trey Berry's status is still questionable. He's their athletic receiving tight end. He's averaged 5.7 targets per game over their last 3. So his absence would be a large one. make sure to watch his status. He was called day to day. He's really cheap if he's active. Outside of that, Zay Flowers has been the true wide receiver one. He's now averaging 9.8 targets per game in their last 4 games. He's only been below 10 targets in one of those. He's been extremely efficient as well. So Zay Flowers is not expensive enough. I think he's a strong play. And from there, you've had Jalen Gill return from injury, and he has slowly worked ahead of Jaden Williams. He's worked ahead of CJ Lewis. Jalen Gill's the wide receiver 2 for this team, and he's 3,800. He has 7 targets in back-to-back games. He should be a punt play worth considering as well. Utah taking on Stanford, our second game, a 7.5-point spread. This is moving rapidly up to 9 in some spots in favor of Utah, 54-point total. Both of these teams are fairly slow. Stanford, more than basically any other team in the country, they are like a bottom 5 pace team. But Utah, they are around league average in pass rate. Stanford is passing at an above average rate because they're playing largely from negative game scripts. We'll start with the Utah side. Cameron Rising beat out Charlie Brewer to start the year. Now he has 300 cumulative rushing yards on the ground. He's been efficient as a passer, nearly 190 per game. And remember, Brewer started the first couple contests, so Rising has only emerged on the scene of late. He's active in both phases, so I think Rising is the best quarterback play on the day, the safest for sure. Stanford's defense is poor against the run. They allow nearly 210 yards per game. Rising, being mobile, does take advantage of that matchup. In the run game, Tavion Thomas has emerged as the clear lead back for this team. He's someone that has at least 19 carries in 3 straight games, and he's seen his carries count rise in each of the last 4. So he's somebody to definitely look at here. You still have TJ Pledger playing a change of pace role, the former Oklahoma back. Micah Bernard's basically been phased out. So I think it's mainly just Tavion Thomas and TJ Pledger as a dart throw, but he's only averaging 6.3 touches per game. Thomas is a good running back play. In the receiving game, you've had a little bit of a changing of the guard. Devon Vele has been running the most routes of late, and he's averaging 5.5 targets per game, which ties Britton Covey for the team lead. Covey's routes have dropped, but he's still very clearly involved in these like gadgety type plays. I think both are good plays overall, but Covey being the cheaper option, he actually projects a little better than Vele right now. I would go Covey tentatively, but both are in play. And they also have tight end Brant Kuthi, who's been a phenomenal receiving threat throughout his career. He's actually second on the team in receiving yards behind his counterpart, Dalton Kincaid. Both are strong options, but Kincaid, he has a little bit of target issues compared to Kuthi. However, that is still reflected in price. You have Kincaid cheaper than Kuthi significantly, and none of the targets for these top 4 options are too different. I think Covey, being the target leader, a strong buy low right now. He's the preferred option, but you can play any of Covey, Kuthi, Vele, and Kincaid. Solomon Enos, he is splitting time with Theo Howard. Neither are particularly strong options. On the Stanford side, Tanner McKee is questionable for this game, and this is a big one because Stanford will throw the ball a ton, so he has good volume, 31 attempts per game, only 240 yards, some middling efficiency, not the most mobile. But if he sits, you're likely looking at a situation where they split reps between Jack West and Isaiah Sanders. That's what the coaching staff has said. And this is another situation like BC where if McKee sits, this QB rotation is not going to be a fun one to target. You can certainly play him in GPPs, and there's a chance that West would just play all the snaps, but the rhetoric coming out of Stanford is not good. So watch the status closely. Unfortunately, it's the night game. Have a contingency plan for sure. In the run game, Austin Jones has sort of worked back ahead of Nathaniel Pete, even though his efficiency has been pathetic this year. He has less rushing yards on more attempts than Pete, but Stanford uses him, and at the very least, it's going to be a 50-50 timeshare. So Pete is maybe a buy low at 3,500. Again, he's just been more efficient than Austin Jones this year, but Austin Jones has more involvement in the pass game as well. He's very clearly ahead of Pete right now, whether we agree with it or not. That is just how Stanford is playing. So Jones, even with the inefficiency, needs to be considered. There's a lot of PPR volume for these backs. So that's a spot where I am interested, especially in Jones, who has immense target volume, 19 targets combined over the last 3 games, whereas Pete, a little less involved. He hasn't been targeted in either of the last 2. In the receiving game, so many injuries for Stanford. We lost Bryson Tremaine early in the year. He will not play. And then you have the number 1 and number 2 receivers in Elijah Higgins and John Humphreys questionable. Higgins got banged up last week. Humphreys has missed the last 2 games, neither of whom have a clear injury designation right now. We just don't know. That means Benjamin Eurosek could operate as the number one. He's their tight end, and he'll be involved whether these guys play or not. So Eurosek becomes the best play, the most secure play in this offense. If Higgins and Humphreys play, they should function as the 1 and the 2. From there, Silas Starr should be the number 3 if they're active, and Silas Starr could rise as high as the number 1 if both of them miss this game. From there, you're also looking at Bryce Farrell as a potential beneficiary here. He's had 3 targets combined in the last 2 weeks. And it's a spot where you could play either Bryce Farrell or Silas Starr near the min price. And they have the chance to see elevated target volume here because of these injuries. So those are the 2 I would take a look at among the min price guys. But again, we need some contingency plans for the entire Stanford offense. Perhaps some big edges here if you're playing the showdown slate, stuff like that. But just injuries to be aware of. But overall, that is our slate. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know in the comment section who your favorite. Thank you guys again, and good luck. We will see you next time.